Topic: What psychology reveals about people who stay quiet on social media. They watch, but they never speak. You see them in your friend list, the ones with no profile pictures, no posts, no comments. They scroll through your photos, your stories, your thoughts. Quietly, they're there, but invisible. And yet, every once in a while you catch a glimpse, a single, maybe a short comment after months of silence. Then nothing again. Who are these people? Are they shy? Are they secretive? Or are they the only ones who've truly figured out the truth about social media? Because here's the strange part. Scientists say up to 40% of social media users never post anything at all. They log in every day, they observe, they consume, but they don't contribute. They're the silent majority of the internet, but why? What's happening in their minds that makes them resist the urge to share, to be seen, to belong? Is it fear of judgment, rejection, or exposure? Or is it something deeper, a quiet confidence, a refusal to be defined by algorithms and likes? Psychologists call it digital detachment, a growing phenomenon where people consciously choose not to perform online. They watch, they learn, they analyze, but never participate, and maybe, just maybe, they're not the outsiders we think they are. Maybe they're the only ones who still remember what it feels like to live without an audience. Because behind every silent profile lies a story, and today, we're going to uncover the psychology behind that silence. Social media was never just a tool, it became a stage. A place where people perform tiny versions of their lives, carefully edited, filtered, and timed for attention. But not everyone steps onto that stage. For every person posting their lunch, their face, their thoughts, there are dozens quietly scrolling past, unseen. They read every caption, every argument, every comment thread, and then simply move on. No reaction, no contribution, just silence. And that silence, it's not random. It's psychological. See, human beings are social creatures. For thousands of years, we've needed community and connection to survive. So why would anyone choose not to share, not to belong, not to speak? Psychologists say that these silent users fall into two broad groups. The first are the watchers, the observers who enjoy understanding others more than being understood themselves. They gain satisfaction not from being seen, but from seeing clearly. The second are the withdrawn, people who once posted, once cared, but eventually felt the exhaustion of constant comparison, judgment, and noise. They stepped away. Not out of weakness, but out of protection. Because social media doesn't just show us others. It mirrors back what we think of ourselves. Every like, every comment, every share becomes a silent test of worth, and for some people that test becomes unbearable. So they disconnect. They retreat into quiet corners of the digital world, not out of disinterest, but out of self-preservation. They still crave connection, but on their own terms. They've seen the chaos of oversharing, the pressure to perform, the constant race for validation. And in their silence, they've found something rare, peace. But here's the paradox. Even in silence, they still play a role in the system. Their views, their clicks, their attention, it all fuels the machine. They read the invisible heartbeat of social media, the ones who give attention but never ask for it. And as we go deeper, you'll discover that their silence isn't emptiness, it's intention. By the end of this story, we'll uncover the fascinating psychology and hidden strength behind those who choose to stay unseen. When social media was first created, it felt magical. A place where everyone could be seen, heard, and connected, no matter where they lived or who they were. At first, it was innocent. People shared photos, birthdays, random thoughts. Every post felt like a small celebration of being alive. And then something changed. Slowly, social media became a mirror, not of who we are, but of who we want to be. Every like became a microdose of dopamine. Every notification a signal that we mattered. It was no longer just sharing, it was performing. And as more people began to perform, a quiet minority began to feel something different, fatigue. They started to notice how posting didn't always bring joy. It brought anxiety, pressure, comparison. Will people like this? Am I interesting enough? Why did my last post get fewer likes? Questions like these began to whisper in the minds of millions. For some, those whispers became noise, unbearable, constant noise, and so they stopped posting. Not because they didn't care, but because they cared too much. Because they realized something deeper, that the moment you post, you hand over a piece of yourself to judgment. Some couldn't handle that exposure. Others didn't want to play the game. They became the silent ones, the watchers, the thinkers, the ones who quietly scrolled without a trace. Psychologists began to notice this pattern and gave it a name: digital withdrawal. It wasn't laziness or apathy, it was a coping mechanism. The silent users weren't disengaged. They were protecting their peace. They found comfort in observing rather than performing. Because when the world started shouting for attention, they discovered the power of not needing any. But what if their silence reveals something even deeper, something about identity, self-worth, and how our brains react to being constantly watched? In the next part, we'll uncover the hidden conflict inside their minds and the surprising science behind why some people truly resist the spotlight. Silence, it turns out, isn't just a lack of words, it's a statement. When psychologists began studying why some people never post online, they discovered a fascinating contradiction. Many of these silent users weren't less social. They weren't disconnected. In fact, they were often more reflective, more self-aware, and more emotionally intelligent than average. But inside their minds, something powerful was happening, a conflict between the need to connect and the fear of exposure. You see, every time someone posts online, their brain prepares for judgment. We subconsciously imagine how others will react, even before we hit share. And for some people, this triggers social evaluation anxiety, the deep psychological discomfort that comes from imagining being watched or judged. Their brain says, stay safe, don't share, don't risk it. This reaction is linked to the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm center, the same system that activates when we sense threat or danger. To the silent user, posting feels like walking onto a stage, one mistake, and the crowd could turn. But not all silence comes from fear. Some people simply have what psychologists call high internal validation. They don't need others to confirm their worth. Their satisfaction comes from within, not from a number under a photo. Others value privacy. In a world where everything is public, keeping something to yourself becomes a form of power. It's not that they have nothing to say, it's that they've learned not everything needs to be said. Still, this choice creates tension. Because even as they stay silent, the digital world keeps demanding visibility. To not post feels almost rebellious, like swimming against the current. And yet, these individuals persist. They've made peace with being unseen. Because deep down, they've realized something most haven't. Sometimes, the truest expression of self isn't in what we show, but in what we choose to keep hidden. In 2019, neuroscientists at Stanford studied how the brain reacts to social media validation, likes, comments, approval. They found something striking. For most people, every like activates the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center, releasing dopamine, the same chemical triggered by gambling or eating chocolate. But here's the twist. For some individuals, those same likes barely register. Their reward circuits stay calm, almost indifferent. They don't crave digital approval because their brains simply don't depend on it. These are the silent ones. The ones who scroll, observe, reflect, but feel no rush to post. Their satisfaction doesn't come from being seen, but from seeing clearly. They find meaning not in applause, but in understanding. Psychologists call this phenomenon digital detachment, a quiet rebellion against the addictive design of online validation. While others chase attention, the detached mind resists. Not because it's cold, but because it values depth over display. And when you think about it, it makes sense. The loudest voices online aren't always the most certain. They often the most insecure, still searching for identity through pixels and praise. But the silent ones, they've found theirs already. They're observers, thinkers, analysts. They're not running from attention. They've simply outgrown it. Still, their silence doesn't mean disconnection. They participate in a different way, through thought, reflection, empathy. They watch patterns, behaviors, emotions unfold, quietly studying humanity from the sidelines. And maybe that's why their presence feels mysterious. Because in a world where everyone's performing, the one who doesn't perform becomes fascinating. They remind us of something we've almost forgotten, that connection isn't measured by visibility, and expression doesn't always require an audience. Maybe silence in a digital age of noise is its own kind of power, not a retreat, but a return to authenticity, to awareness, to the self. Silence, in a world that never stops talking, is no longer just quiet, it's strength, it's awareness, it's choice. Those who don't post on social media aren't broken, insecure, or out of touch. They re the ones who've noticed what constant connection has done to us, the anxiety, the comparison, the endless craving to be seen. And they've quietly stepped away from the noise, not because they reject connection, but because they value clarity over attention. Psychologists say this group often reports higher levels of self-reflection and mental calm. They don't measure their worth through numbers or comments. Their identity isn't built on reactions, it's built on self-acceptance. Their silence reminds us of something deeply human, that it's okay to live a life that's not on display. That privacy isn't loneliness, it's protection. In the end, maybe those who don't post aren't disconnected from the world. Maybe they're simply reconnected to themselves. They've traded digital applause for inner peace. They've chosen to listen instead of shout, to observe instead of perform. And perhaps that's the lesson for all of us. That once in a while we should step back from the endless scroll, not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. Because sometimes silence isn't the absence of noise. It's the moment you finally hear yourself again. So the next time you scroll past someone who never posts, never updates, never shares, don't assume they have nothing to say. Maybe they just understand something the rest of us don't. Maybe they've realized that true confidence isn't shouting the loudest, it's being at peace in silence. That the world doesn't need to see every part of your life to make it meaningful. Because the truth is, we all wear masks online, carefully curated versions of who we want others to believe we are. But the ones who choose not to post? They've simply put the mask down. They've remembered what it means to live without an audience. And maybe that's the real freedom we're all searching for, to be unseen, but still complete. If this made you think differently about the digital world, wait till you see what your posting habits secretly reveal about your personality. Hit subscribe, because the next story might just expose how your mind behaves when the world is watching.